Coming up in this week's episode of Destination Linux, we have an interview with Jill Bryant. We'll take a look at Ubuntu 20.04, discuss Fedora 32 beta, some of the benchmarks between the latest Fedora and Ubuntu, and we'll dive into our software spotlight along with the tips and tricks, as well as discuss Proton in our gaming section. All this and more coming up on Destination Linux. Welcome to Destination Linux, episode 171. This is a podcast about sharing our passion for Linux and open source. Destination Linux is a show for experiences of all levels, so whether you're a beginner to Linux or a master sudo, we welcome you. My name's Noah, and with me today are the newest residents of the Animal Crossing, Michael and Ryan and Jill. Hey guys, What's going on this week?
Well, first, we enjoy our new residency at Animal Crossing, so that has been fun. Also,
I played that game so much on my mobile, by the way. It's available on your mobile device with my daughter. And what an insanely stupid concept that's so much fun.
Right.
So, Jill, how about you? What have you been up to this week? It's good to see you again.
Yeah, I know. Great, good to see you outside of Scale, Noah, and Michael outside of Big Daddy Linux, and Ryan. This is the first time I actually talking to him outside of his YouTube videos and Twitter.
Absolutely.
Just out of curiosity, I need some clarification here now. Do you talk to Ryan during his YouTube videos? Like, do you have him up on the screen and give him feedback?
I have, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Jill has been a patron of my show for a very long time supporter. Jill's amazing and supports lots of shows out there in the Linux community. So I want to thank you personally for that, Jill.
Oh, thank you. And what I'd like to say first off is I'm excited to be here and like Ryan was just saying, I've been a viewer and patron of Destination Linux, of Tux Digital, and of Ryan's channel from the beginning.
Thank you. There's no way we could thank you too much. But we are very excited to have you on the show.
Oh, Same here. And so what have I been up to? I've been doing lots of podcasting, of course, game streaming, and having fun testing Ubuntu 20.04 and playing games, including Serious Sam 2 on Proton, and it's working beautifully.
Nice.
Oh, very nice. So Serious Sam is one I've not gotten into before. Is this and I think it's up my alley. It's a first-person shooter, as I recall.
Yes.
And it's been around for a while, right?
Yeah. In fact, we've played almost every one on LinuxGameCast, and I love playing Serious Sam because it's really fun with multiplayer. Because it has a lot. It's a first-person shooter, but it has a lot of humor in it, and it's just a lot of fun to play with your friends and try shooting each other.
So we do a DL gaming night again. We're going to have to put Serious Sam on the menu there.
Yeah, for sure.
It's awesome.
Michael, how about you? What have you been up to this week?
Well, I've been doing quite a few things in the back end for all kinds of stuff. I even changed some OBS settings.
Oh, that's
Do we get new scenes?
Ooh.
Yeah, please tell me we have another 80 scenes.
Well, I just changed what existing scenes already did, but I didn't make any new ones. But don't worry, those are coming next time. I've also wrote some articles for Front Page Linux. That's our new article website and news site. And I wrote an article about the release of Ubuntu 20.04 and all the details and stuff like that. And I also wrote an article that's a little bit clickbaity, in the sense that it tells you, it's an article about how to upgrade to 20.04, but should you?
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah, and the answer to that is basically yes and no. It depends on your hardware and your setup. But anyway, I also did something that I am super excited about, and it was a long time coming, obviously, because how long it takes to do that. But episode 100 of This Week in Linux was this past episode, so I am so happy and I'm so excited that I finally got to that. And I didn't expect to get to 10, much less 100.
We didn't either. So congratulations.
Thanks, buddy.
I'm kidding.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
You had a huge showing of people. You did your show live again. You haven't done your show. For those that don't know, Michael does so much for Destination Linux behind the scenes, truly. All of the editing, a lot of the website work, marketing, all of those things. And what has had to be sacrificed, unfortunately, is his own show, getting his show live and all of that stuff to get all of this content out. So the fact that you were able to bring it back live for episode 100 was amazing. And the amount of people that showed up to see it, I thought was quite amazing as well. A lot of people were very thirsty to have that back. live
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So
That was pretty awesome.
Good job.
And I just for anyone, I just want to thank everybody who showed up to the live, especially because it was also on a Monday and not on a reasonable time frame. It was like Monday afternoon. But I just want to thank them for so much for showing up, because it was also, I didn't even tell anybody it was gonna happen. I just started it live, and then people started showing up, and it's like it's so fantastic to have that kind of support. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah.
Ryan, how about you? What have you been up to this week?
So I released a new video this week about tips for working from home. For those that don't know, working from home is a new thing for me. I've been doing it for well over 5 years and manage remote teams and other things as well across the US. And so I've gathered a lot of tips for people who are now finding themselves in a work from home spot for the first time, and things that have helped me reduce cabin fever, not get overly stressed, not work yourself to death when you are working from home, and things like that. And surprised how popular that video's gotten. So appreciate all the feedback there. And outside of that, I've just been doing a lot of deep diving into Python. So I've been taking a lot of courses in Python. I've done this before, as you all remember. I kind of started dabbling in Python, but this time I'm really doing the full circle that I tell people when I'm learning something new, of books and audio books and videos and professional courses, and actually doing exercises and really trying to get my skills with Python to the highest level possible and having an absolute blast with it. It's such a good language. If you've not picked up a programming language before, I see why everyone says start with Python. It's just so, I don't know, understandable, and you can progress with it and get results almost immediately. Because that's the big thing when you're writing a program. You're putting all this weird text in, it's this other language, and you're waiting for a result. And I think that's why a lot of people like web page building and things, because you can kind of refresh and see your result immediately. Python's that same way, I feel like, where you can see the results of the code you're learning near immediate and start applying it to things. And that's what makes it really cool.
Yeah, the barrier to entry for Python is so small, yet at the same time, the power of that and flexibility that Python offers is so high. So you can start simply and then start building out to a much more complex project. And that's one of the reasons why Python is considered the best for beginners, because it has that the easy barrier to entry. Yeah, scale. It also has the massive growth scale. Yeah. So like there's so many reasons. If you've never done programming at all, definitely check out Python.
Yep. And I've taken 2 courses, one from University of Michigan and one I'm taking from Georgia Tech. And I can tell you that I'm trying to get some of these teachers on, because some of these teachers in the Python world are so fantastic. I'd love to get them on the show. So I've reached out to them.
Nice.
So maybe that will help in future episode. But Noah, what have you been up to?
It's actually been pretty slow. We had an initial uptake, obviously, at Ultispeed, where everybody wanted to get on board with remote VPN and remote work and stuff like that. But the last couple of weeks, I've really been spending a lot of time just hanging out with family, because, the kids are home, doing school from home. Obviously, my wife is not, shopping or going out with her girlfriends or anything like that. So everybody's just kind of at home. Mm-hmm. Like you, I was working from home before it was cool. And so what that's kind of translated to me is we're having a lot of fires outside in the backyard. I spent yesterday, I bought my daughter a new ThinkPad, and it was kind of fun. My son was sitting there trying to convince my wife that she should switch from GNOME to KDE. And the way that he chose to go about trying to make his case for that was he turned on wobbly windows. And I don't know if you've seen this effect, but there's an effect where the window will just like disintegrate into little tiny, it's like vaporized. And so he turned this on his sister's computer, and then proceeded to go around to the rest of the family saying, here's why you should use the KDE desktop. And I was like, attaboy, plasma kid, and like, awesome. And
you're raising them right.
Well, here's the thing. So my wife says, yeah, I don't have time for that, because then I'd have to reset up all of my stuff. And of course he says, well, that's not a problem, Mom. I'll reset everything up. I'll just reinstall. In fact, when I reinstalled my operating system the last time, I set up encryption on Lux encryption, and it's really cool. Then you need a password to boot the rest of your computer. And so I was like, hey, this is going in the right place. I just hope when I come upstairs after doing this show, like every computer hasn't been reinstalled.
I feel like we should do a show on that maybe next week, where we talk about the things you can do, geek things you can do with your family during this lockdown.
Oh,
because
yeah.
I've got some good stuff. We did these robotics kits with my kids this week to build a spider and things. And there's so many cool things you can do out there during this time to kind of, I know it's not a great time for many, but that you can maximize very low cost some of your interactions with your family and maybe get something good out of it, right?
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
This episode of Destination Linux and the entire DLN network is now sponsored by DigitalOcean. Now, you might ask yourself, how can an entire network be sponsored by DigitalOcean? Well, it's simple. DigitalOcean is the only cloud platform capable of powering the Destination Linux network. We have all of our servers, all of our web servers, all of the services that you use. You ask yourself, how is it that this group of people are able to have Front Page Linux, a DLN podcast, all of the other podcasts that they do, the ability to bring all of these people in the Linux community together? Well, it's all powered by the world-class DigitalOcean and their customer support. They offer services for $5 per month. So you can use their flexible pricing structure for as low as 0.7 cents per hour. As Ryan would say, that's darn near free. DigitalOcean also has over 2,000 cloud-agnostic tutorials. So if you don't know what you want to spin up on DigitalOcean, they'll help you decide, and then they're going to give it away for free so you can try it out. Now, you can get started by going to DigitalOcean and getting a $100 credit by going to do.co/DLN. And that's not only going to get you a $100 credit that you can spin up a DigitalOcean droplet for free for a couple of months. It's also going to tell them that you appreciate them appreciating us. So help them help us by helping yourself by going to do.co/DLN. And a huge thanks to DigitalOcean for sponsoring this episode of Destination Linux.
So in our community feedback section, Daniel writes in and says, "Hi guys, first of all, I love DL and all of the DLN shows. I really respect you guys' opinions, except perhaps in matters of stools." That's fair. You know what? That is fair critique right there. And the DLN community is a great resource for learning new things, helping others with their problems, and generally geeking out. Love that. We're all fans of Firefox here, and I'm sure we all have our favorite browser extensions, including privacy-focused ones like Privacy Badger or HTTPS Everywhere. However, Mozilla has been continually rolling out new built-in privacy features, and one cannot help but wonder if some of these beloved add-ons are redundant or even a weakness for fingerprinters to exploit. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Thanks, Daniel. Well, first of all, thank you, Daniel, for watching and listening to all the shows out there. We greatly appreciate it and love your email here. And this is a great question because I found myself personally reducing the amount of extensions I use tremendously because I feel like it's the greatest attack vector within a browser. And I think people trust automatically that a lot of these extensions out there that are free, by the way. So somebody out there is writing a lot of code for free, sticking them out there like you have in the Android store. And there's just a lot of opportunity for Bitcoin mining, information theft, all of that stuff out there. So I've reduced tremendously. If it comes from the EFF, like their Privacy Badger and things like that, those are some extensions I use. Of course, Bitwarden extension, and I have a Joplin extension. But outside of that, those are the only ones that I use.
Yeah, I use quite a bit of extensions, but in the terms of privacy stuff like that, I think the majority of what Firefox offers is what's needed. Like I like what they offer now in their latest versions. So I did remove some of my extensions that are related to that. But there are things that I think Privacy Badger and HTTPS Everywhere are very useful. I don't know if that would be like the fingerprinting issue would be a thing because of having those, but I don't really know enough about the topic anyway to really give you a suggestion about like what I would do. But I think that there's a lot of value in those extensions still anyway. So maybe we could do some more research and find out like which one, like is it worth? Is there any redundancy with having those versus just using the Firefox and that kind of thing? But I still use a significant amount of extensions. Like Ryan only has a couple. I have probably like 20. And in fact,
Michael tries to get me to install extensions all the time, and he'll start the sentence with this: "I know you don't like extensions, but check out this one here." Yeah. I'm like, I don't do them anymore. Jill, what do you do with extensions?
I use lots of ad blockers and for instance for YouTube and for websites, because when we're doing our shows, I'm doing in the show notes, I need to be able to look at the pages with all the ads coming up.
Good point. Yep.
So that's a thing. And another point I kind of wanted to bring up is that one of the reasons that Mozilla was adding all these privacy features is that because they needed to help grow revenue. They laid off 70 employees back in January, and this is one of the ways that they're getting revenue, because their revenue income dried up when they didn't get sponsored from like the Google search and all that. So
Now, how do they make money off of extensions? Are they charging for some of these? Maybe if you're a commercial entity or something?
Correct. They're Firefox private network VPN. They're charging, I think, $20 a month. I may be wrong on that, but it was something like that.
That's for the services and stuff. And I think they charge for some of the other services. It's kind of like doing a competitor to Google's suite, kind of in a way. And I think that I don't think the privacy in terms of like how they change the configuration of like the strict mode and that stuff. I don't think they have any way of making money on that. I think they're using the services on top of it to make money. And I think that it's a good approach, and I'm actually glad that Mozilla's doing it. And we talked about it a long time ago, where when we were talking about some people trying to create their own competitor to Google's G Suite, we wanted Mozilla to do it because that was like the best example we could come up with. That it has the long track record and has a ton of great reputation. So I'm glad that they're doing it, and I think it's fantastic that we have that as an option now.
Yeah.
Noah, what do you use for extensions?
I have a couple that I'm a big fan of. So the first and like one that I probably couldn't live without, I actually talked about it at Ask Noah this week, is Dark Reader. And Dark Reader is an extension that turns all of the web pages either dark or light. And of course, my case, I want them dark. I, of course, have the Bitwarden extension, and then I have the DuckDuckGo extension that allows an encrypted connection to DuckDuckGo, and then also keeps track of trackers and so on and so forth, as well as site privacy protection. Other than that, I'm with you, Ryan. I don't want extensions because they're something that is installed on your system that has a tremendous amount of access to your data and not a whole lot of oversight by you, because the browser is going to update. New code changes are just going to come down, and you probably don't think about it. When I go to install an extension, what I heavily rely on is reviews and a privacy policy. People that use Firefox are very privacy conscious, and so their reviews tend to highlight what they found, and there are people that are far smarter than me at being able to look at an extension and figure out what the code is actually doing. So I think my time is far better served relying on those people. And so when I go see an extension and I see review after review, it's capturing this. There's no reason that it needs permission to do this. That's good, because I wouldn't know that. I don't know what a reasonable permission is or not. I would say that there's no reason that a dark theme extension needs access to the content in my tabs, but I guess maybe you can't make the thing dark without, I don't know. So other people do. And so I heavily rely on those reviews. And so when I see an extension like Dark Reader that has the same privacy policy and a bunch of people saying, hey, the code is open, it's on GitHub, this is what's happening, this is good, I like this, okay, great, we're going to go ahead and install that. Bitwarden, again, open source. The code is presumably being audited by people, and if something did come out, I expect that I would hear about it. So I try and keep extensions minimal, but the reality is that the world is heavily moving towards a browser-focused world, and so if you want a to-do list, if you want password managers and so on and so forth, if you want that kind of experience, then you have to find a privacy conscious way to get it. And I think Firefox offers that the best choice for that to happen.
And by the way, Firefox needs to get on some podcasts and shows and do some better advertising. I understand that they're financially strapped right now, but it's odd to me that they have all these services launching. And I don't think a lot of people even know that they've launched, that they're out there. So I know we have listeners all around the world. So if you know somebody at Firefox, tell them to get somebody. By the way, they can advertise on here for free by just coming on and letting us do an interview with them. They need to talk about this stuff, because I know they're hurting financially, but they're not talking about it. They're not reaching out to the podcast and things that could really get that message out. And I feel like they could do that without spending a dime by just having somebody come on and talk about their products and what they're doing, because I think it's fascinating. We all want to support it. You got to get out there and talk about it.
Yep. Very important point. And I also want to go back just a little bit. I do, when I want to say the extensions thing, I use a lot of extensions, but I also, vet the extensions I use. I don't just blindly install them. But there's one I do want to talk about, because speaking of marketing, I did a video about 7 reasons I like Firefox, and one of those is talking about some extensions. So you could check that out and find out. But I'll give you a quick little synopsis. Is that number one reason was the Firefox extension that is made by Mozilla, which is the multi-account containers extension, or container tabs, and it is one of the most important features of Firefox these days, and it's one of the main reasons that I use Firefox now. And every time when I have people tell me, like, you should use Brave, you should use Chrome, or you should use Vivaldi or whatever, and like, well, do they have account containers? No. Then no, I'm using Firefox.
And in our next community feedback, we have John who writes us to say, "Hi guys, this is perhaps a little unconventional video message, but thought you might enjoy. Here's a short video of my 3-year-old son using my ThinkPad running Fedora GNOME to get to his Very Hungry Caterpillar YouTube video." So what's amazing about this video, for those of you who are listening to the audio version of the podcast, is to set the scene. There's a ThinkPad out there. You see the little hands of a 3-year-old navigating through GNOME easily, opening up the menu, getting the web browser open, and navigating to the Hungry Caterpillar videos all on his own, next to a tray of cookies, what looks like a tray of cookies, and a little toy car. So for those that say Linux is too hard, it's not approachable, it's too difficult, take a look at this video, and I think you'll change your mind pretty quickly on that. And it just shows really how far along, we've come in Linux since we've started.
I think it's not only just is it awesome that it shows that, a kid who's like 3 years old could also do it, but it's not only is it easy to use now these days, but also this is an adorable video.
Yeah. And I thought it was cool that he was actually using the touchpad. He wasn't even using a mouse.
That's a good point.
That's good motor control for a little one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, John, for sending that adorable video in and sharing that with us. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you very much.
We love hearing from our worldwide community. We have many ways for your voice to be heard. You can send a short email or video that may get incorporated to the show. You can send your video links or emails to comments@destinationlinux.org. We'd like to welcome to the show Jill Bryant-Ryniker. Jill is the co-host of LinuxGameCast's LWDW, co-organizer for Linux Chicks LA, teacher, animator, gamer, and user of all things Linux. Perhaps more importantly than all of that, Jill is known throughout the Linux community as one of the kindest, happiest people that you're ever going to meet. So with that, without further ado, we're excited to welcome Jill into the show. Jill, welcome into Destination Linux. I guess let's start with this.
Aww.
Tell me a little bit about how you got started in Linux.
Oh boy. So it was actually 1993, and I downloaded lots of Slackware Linux floppy images from my brother's BBS way back when, which I was the sysop of. And I was a sysop, but I was also my brother's sister operator.
I love it.
Nice. It's awesome.
So that was the thing. And yeah, spending hours just installing all those floppies and making sure I didn't blow out my CRT.
We have a Hardware Addicts podcast where we talk about hardware, and I was about to ask you, because you are the hardware queen in my mind, about do you miss the sound and the steps of putting floppy disks in and loading things?
Yes.
But I'm guessing you don't miss that sound because you probably have some machines around that still have floppy disks for you to install that stuff.
Oh yeah, probably about half the computers in my room have floppy disks still in them.
Do you remember the little boxes we all used to buy, at least I did, that would hold like 150 of the floppy disks, and it would have little tabs like file folder. You'd keep them all kind of organized the best you can. Oh.
Yeah, in fact, I have to the left of me is a cabinet literally full of thousands of floppy disks that are all cataloged. And I transferred them way back when to SciQuest drives, to zip drives, and now I've got them, on CD-ROMs and DVDs.
Man.
So
do you remember SciQuest drives, Ryan?
No.
It was they were 1 gigabyte discs, if I remember right. And at the time, it was massive because you had 1.4 megs on a floppy disk, or you could do 1 gigabyte on a SciQuest drive. And then iOmega screwed the pooch on it because they came out with their zip drive, which had 100 megs.
See, that's what I remember was the zip drive after the floppy.
And the reason you remember iOmega and not SciQuest is because they iOmega tanked SciQuest. They introduced a driver so where if you installed an iOmega, the driver for the iOmega zip drive, your SciQuest drive would stop working, and the SciQuest was actually a better drive.
Yeah.
That's
the
messed
SciQuest
up.
drives were like miniature SCSI drives.
Yeah.
And they were
that sounds amazing.
Much faster. I mean, in this room, I have some parallel port ones. I have IDE ones. It
was like a hard drive.
Yeah, it was a little Bernelli hard drive. In fact, back in those days, when I was doing freelance animation, we used to send our files on SciQuest drives to FedEx those to different studios and whatnot.
This is awesome. I've never heard of the SciQuest. Is that what it was?
That was it.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of people pulling up their browser search engine right now, I think.
Yeah.
Well, here, I'll give you one more thing to look at. So after SciQuest and iOmega finished battling it out, then Sony came out with something called a magneto optical drive, or an MO drive.
Mhm.
I love it, Magneto.
And so the MO drive was 25 gigabytes per side of an MO disk. And so and I actually still have some original SCSI MO drives that I still have. And so those magneto optical drives were what was heavily used in industry for transferring large data sets like architectural and graphic rendering and stuff like that from one machine to and videos and stuff from one machine to another. Yeah, it was fantastic. Man, the 90s were great. I want to go back to that. That's when things were like, they got better all the time.
You can go back to it, and hackers would be so confused if they ever got into some of your systems, wouldn't know what to do. So, Jill, open source has been a huge part of your life, obviously, and we'd love to know why open source is important to you personally. We covered this on our episode or two ago of why open source is important to us. And so I thought it'd be great to find out from you why open source is important.
Well, what drew me to it way back when was the wonderful open collaborative framework and being able to contribute and tinker with it to make it better and share it with other users in the community. It was just it's so far more progressive than the framework for proprietary software.
I agree.
Which, quite frankly, iterates a lot slower and is often behind their open source counterparts as a result, like Blender, for instance.
Yes.
Blender is way ahead of a lot of the proprietary 3D software because it's able to iterate a lot quicker.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
we look at OBS, you look at things like Blender. Let me ask you something. We talked about in that episode about open source that there's kind of this movement of, in some cases, hey, proprietary is fine, just use proprietary. And I feel like some people coming into the community are missing out on the concept of open source. What is your balance between the proprietary and the open source for new users?
It's, for me as an animator and a teacher, I have to teach proprietary software as well.
Yep.
But what I do, my focus is I make sure it runs under I only teach software proprietary that runs under Linux.
Nice.
So, like Maya and the full DaVinci Resolve suite.
Nice.
And I just make sure, but I try to, I always show them the open source options, to have them play around with Kdenlive or Shotcut and Krita and GIMP and Inkscape and all the wonderful graphic softwares that are out there.
And I think that's the great balance, right? That's what we were saying was kind of missing. It's okay when you have to, like in your profession, my profession, there's sometimes I have to use proprietary software, but make sure as a community, we're still introducing open source to people as alternatives. I think is really important.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing about open source, what has drawn me to open source, is the community. Yay!
Naturally. Yep.
Absolutely.
Naturally. So amazing, passionate, and giving. And, once I started going to the Southern California Linux Expo 14 years ago, I knew they were my new family.
I love that.
Yeah.
And the community is a huge part of why we love using Linux and one of the reasons why we even started doing podcasting. And so we know that you've done a lot of like distro hopping, and you would say you're a distro hopper and everything like that. But we wanted to also kind of dive in a little bit more deeper than the distro part and talk about the desktop environments and like what is your go-to desktop environment and why is it Plasma?
I do like Plasma. I actually like all the DEs. But there's actually quite a few of my go-tos. I'm a bit old school, and because I started in Linux many years ago and used Unix before that, the classic and memory-efficient X window managers are really my favorite.
That's fair.
Love it.
Fair.
Yeah. So I jump back and forth from Window Maker, Enlightenment, Flexbox, XFCE, and even TWM quite often.
I love the XFCE love in there. XFCE needs so much more love in the community. Yes. I feel like it's so undervalued, the work that's done there.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And it's really nice because it's, a bit heavier than the lighter weight, of course, Window Maker, Flexbox, and whatnot. But it's a lot lighter than GNOME or KDE or Cinnamon. So,
yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And like I was saying earlier, I actually do use all the desktop environments. In fact, I'm using classic GNOME on Ubuntu Mate right now, 19.10, because I've been testing it on the broadcast rig, and now I'm going to update it to 20.04.
I've been following you as you've been doing different DEs and stuff, and GNOME seems to be something that you're actually starting to, I don't know, maybe you always have, but something you're really starting to have an appreciation for recently, at least in the videos and stuff that I've been watching. What do you think's changed in GNOME that's allowed you to have a different look at it?
Oh, well, they've cleaned it up. The speed is much better. There's not as much cached source code. So now it's cleaner. They've cleaned up all the little bits and the behind the scenes on it, and it's just so much more zippy than it used to be.
Yeah.
And that was why I always liked the classic, GNOME, because it was faster.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think they've done a lot of work on the performance, and that's helped a lot of people kind of rediscover GNOME again. Yeah. That's good work they're doing.
And they've cleaned it up visually as well. All those little ticks, even, the icons work faster, and just everything. It's just much smoother experience now.
When you were interviewed on Linux Spotlight, you mentioned that your passion for Corel Linux. Can you talk about what you liked about Corel Linux in specific?
Oh boy. So when it was released in 1999, I was teaching Corel Draw at the time, along with Autodesk 3D Studio for DOS and Autodesk Animator for DOS. And it was just so exciting to have an industry standard graphics program, not only working on Linux, but having a Linux distro that was enhanced just for it. And the Corel installer, bar none, was one of the easiest to use at that time. And I had several of my students install it in our class, as well as at their houses, and to get them to start using Corel Draw on Linux.
I love it.
It was just the amazing thing about it was, Corel Linux proved that Wine could be used to run industry standard software, including Corel Draw and Corel WordPerfect Office. They run on Wine on Corel. So Wine became a big boy at that point. It really had. And
I haven't been in Linux long enough to have been there for Corel Linux, but this fascinated me because back when owning a computer shop with my dad, Corel was one of the most popular packages we'd include with our computers out there. So I went and started looking up screenshots when you were mentioning it of Corel Linux. What made Corel Linux go away? I'm curious there. People stopped caring about it.
Yeah, well, they did have really easy networking on Windows, but they had built a lot of their own tools, which didn't translate well to other versions of Debian Linux.
Gotcha.
And that kind of ultimately killed it.
It's kind of interesting because I was around at the time and I saw it, but I never tried it. Even though I used Corel's other stuff like Corel Draw and later I think Corel bought PaintShop Pro and stuff like that. And I did use a lot of products from Corel, but I never tried the Corel Linux thing. And now I feel like I missed out because the time that I started using Linux was in 1999, so it never even came on my radar to actually try it. So I kind of feel like maybe that Corel was ahead of their time in terms of like what they were offering in that era, and maybe if they were to do something like this now, they would actually have like a better platform and a better ecosystem to work with. So this would be like a good incentive to send to Corel and see if they would think about it.
Yeah, come on back,
very
Corel.
true. Very true. You can still buy their software. It's still around. It's just not as used. Adobe's the king.
Yeah, I still use PaintShop Pro, even though it's not
awesome.
It's not it's like there's still the battle between Photoshop and PaintShop Pro, but I still have I have both and also other things. So I think there's a potential that maybe they could consider it. I hope they do.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, like you said, it took Adobe with Illustrator and Photoshop a long time to come up with some of the functions that Corel had. And and in fact, a lot of people don't realize this, but Photoshop came from Aldus Photostyler. Adobe didn't invent Photoshop.
Yeah,
I did not know that. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, Adobe didn't invent most of the stuff they have.
Yeah,
actually, it's like almost anything that they made that they make now is not theirs originally.
Wow.
Oh, and PhotoPaint had animation, and so it was one of the first times you could do animation on a Linux box. And Photoshop, when it came out initially, didn't have animation. It wasn't until later.
So what's the difference between why Adobe really took off and Corel never did? Was it marketing, or was it just they started having better features than Corel?
I think they just had more money behind them, was a lot of it.
Yeah,
okay.
probably.
We see that a lot, right?
Yeah.
There's the marketing and also the partnerships and stuff, yeah.
The partnerships. And, Corel was huge also for desktop publishing and printing. And all of a sudden, Illustrator came along and Photoshop and Adobe kind of took that market. So it's sad, but it's true. And I still like a lot of Adobe products, but I prefer Corel.
Nice.
Still do.
So out of the list of a million reasons why we love Jill, one of the top of my list is the fact that you're so into hardware. We thought it would be fun, though, to find out what hardware is currently on your wish list. So let's imagine we're in the Star Trek universe. Money is no object. What are the top pieces of hardware Jill would buy right now?
Oh, boy. I want a Next Cube. I have a Next Station, but not the Cube. And they are thousands of dollars working. And I had worked with one of those in college. And actually, I'd worked with it before Steve Jobs had taken over Next. So it was a German company. And I just remember being so impressed with how fast it would render.
So this launched back in the 90s with a $10,000 price tag.
Price tag, yeah. And I had one at college.
And it ran a whole 25 megahertz processor. So that thing was rendering fast. For the 90s, that was pretty fast.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And I also had, of course, an Amiga video toaster and all that stuff, too. But I also, I do have, I don't have the Next Cube, but I do have a working beautifully Power Mac G4 Cube in my collection that runs Debian.
Nice.
I love it.
Up. It was my entertainment PC for a while in the living room. And it was inspired by the Next Cube. And actually, boy, this was a hard one, Ryan, because there are so many computers I want. So.
I knew it would be tough for you. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just kind of chose my top ones. But the next one on the list would be the Cray XMP supercomputer from 1982, which was a huge, beautifully designed cylindrical supercomputer that you could actually walk into the center of. And it's one of my favorite movies of all time was rendered on it, The Last Starfighter.
Nice. You would have to move a lot of your penguins in the background in order to fit that into your house. Yeah,
definitely. To give you a little background, I have several hundred computers this is my official computer room, but I have several hundred more in the garage in storage.
Oh my gosh, several hundred.
I was going to say, did she say several hundred? How do you store them all?
I know it's hard.
Insane.
I need to redo my computer room here. I'm going to actually be putting up shelves and stuff, but
are they all accessible? Like, are they all accessible, or are they like heavily stored like in boxes and stuff?
Oh, okay. So the ones in here, I have many of the older ones hooked up to KVM switches so that I can still fire them up and use them. And some of them will have their own keyboards and mice, but quite a few of them are on their own KVM switches. And the ones in the garage are in storage. They're in plastic bins, very organized. I'm very OCD. So they're very organized and on
you have to be organized
racks.
In order to have that many
several hundred computers around.
Yes.
Yeah, otherwise it would just be a nightmare.
I'm so jealous thinking of what if I kept all of those computers over the years I had.
Right.
I kept some of the processors sitting on the shelf, like the IBM Blue Lightning and some of my original AMD processors, but that was about as much space as my wife would give me for storing the older ones.
Well, speaking of which, some of my pride and joy treasures in here are my dual processor DEC Alpha.
Nice.
It was the first 64-bit machines, and that was my render workstation. It's can't quite see it in this shot. It's next to my companion cube.
I love that too.
It's on wheels, and it's like the size of a coffee table. And I have some SGI machines back there. I've got some Commodores, Sun workstations.
So what do you do with the
everything.
retro components? Obviously, running stuff on them is pretty slow compared to a computer today,
Yes.
right? So is it more of just nostalgia for you, or do you actually get work done on them sometimes?
Actually, believe it or not, sometimes I do get work done.
That's awesome.
That Deck Alpha I can still use for rendering. In fact, it's just been a few years ago that you could, rent a Deck Alpha for rendering. They were still being used in the industry for rendering.
Wow.
Not anymore, but
Right.
it took a long time before they died because of the so powerful, at the time. 500 megahertz in the mid 90s at 64-bit.
Yeah. That was fire.
Yeah, that was fire. 2 processors, 128 gigs of RAM, and like 4 full height SCSI drives.
So
Yeah.
our patrons are going nuts over your collection, Jill. They're all in awe and jealous, but one is asking if you're considering ever opening Jill Bryant's Museum of Computing. And I like this idea.
Oh, everyone tells me that, and I would love to someday. I mean, that's when everyone comes into this computer room. They're always very impressed. And what's kind of cool is I do have some computers that the local Computer History Museum does not have. So at some point I'll probably donate them, but probably not for a very long time.
I love it. Yeah. They're your babies.
Yeah, they're my babies. And so the other computer I've been wanting is the Commodore PET. I have several Commodores, including the VIC-20 and 64, but not the PET. So they're very, very, very expensive as well. And one of the things I do with my collection is that a lot of the vintage computer collectors don't do, because they're not necessarily Linux enthusiasts, is trying to get Linux to run on everything.
Nice.
Wow.
Awesome.
So that's the thing. I have Linux. I have a Mac Classic back there, and I've got Linux on that. And of course, all my deck equipment runs Linux. SGI, the SGI machines were running Unix, and I went and put Linux on that. But a lot of the rare computers that just were made for Windows, I've tried to get Linux on, and most of them I've been pretty successful with.
So I'm just curious, if you didn't run Linux, let's say it didn't exist and it was a sad, sad world, would you be a Mac person?
No.
Nope.
No.
Can we go back for just a second? I'm sorry to get you. It's
Unix.
very rare.
It's
very rare that we have the opportunity to talk to somebody who's into retro hardware. So I have to ask you, did you say you have a DEC system?
Yes.
Have you read any of Kevin Mitnick's stuff?
Oh, yes.
So that was his early days, right? I mean, that was his heyday, was DEX. And so it would be so interesting. I mean, that is literally what inspired the entire 1986 essentially ban on hacking. Was DEX and the things that were perpetuated back in the early 90s. I mean, this is fascinating. And you have one of these machines and it's functional.
Yes.
Do you hack on it, Jill? Tell us the truth. Yes.
I have.
Love it.
Of course she does.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah, in fact, it's dual booting Debian, CentOS, and I have Windows NT 4.0, because back in the day with animation software, that's how we did it. Some of them only worked on NT, but I haven't booted that partition a long time. It's mostly Debian and Linux all the way.
Nice.
I love it.
So we're gonna as much as I don't want to leave this subject, we're gonna pivot away to a little bit to talk about like what Linux needs, because you're using Linux on so many different types of hardware, and so you've experienced quite a bit in terms of like usability and experience for Linux. So I'm curious, what needs to happen in your opinion to increase like the market share of Linux on the desktop for the majority of people?
Yeah, and that was a really good question, Michael, that we're all trying to figure out here in the
True.
community. My idea was selling laptops and desktop computers with Linux pre-installed is really a great start.
Mm-hmm.
Linux distributions are starting to see the benefit of selling branded laptops and computers, not only in marketing and helping to brand their distros, but monetary benefits as well. And this includes, of course, the Pine Book with Debian, System 76 with Pop! OS, the KDE Slim Book with KDE, the Dell XPS Developer Edition with Ubuntu, and now the newly introduced Lenovo ThinkPad laptops with Fedora. And the reason why this is so important is marketing hardware with open source software installed to the average consumer is a lot easier than just marketing the ideals and use of free software. If it's a pretty computer with all the bells and whistles and bling bling at a reasonable price, and the software doesn't require a lot of work to use, it is easier to market Linux. Kind of like Google did with the Chromebook.
Very true.
We're going to be talking about the Fedora laptop later in the show, but I agree with you that this move that you're seeing from Manjaro, from multiple vendors, of course, System 76 and Pop! OS, and that are getting hardware out there, I think this is one of the most critical steps to really continuing the growth of Linux. And I'm so happy to see it out there. And the popularity of the Pine Book alone, let's not forget that one out there. Just absolutely amazing seeing all of this hardware come out. And I think that's really a start of something big if we as a community, of course, come around and make sure that we support them, right? When we're out there for looking for a new laptop and things. It is cheaper to go out on eBay and buy a used one. But if you can afford it, supporting one with Linux on it from the start is a big help, I think, to start letting companies like Dell and others realize, hey, there's a market here and these people are willing to purchase these machines.
Yes.
And I think that's a great point. And I think that it's awesome that all these companies are doing it, and there are so many people who are interested in getting hardware that's running Linux by default. And I think that just it's a huge potential, and I'm glad that the other companies, even like we'll talk about it later, but Canonical is starting to work on that more too. And I think that is fantastic as well, because there's so many variables that in order to get Linux to be mainstream, that has to be one of the biggest ones. So I'm glad that people are doing it.
I've been craving for that System 76 Lemire Pro.
Haven't we all?
Yes,
absolutely.
Rumor is you're a huge Star Wars fan, so we would like you to weigh in with the ranking.
I do love Star Wars, but no Star Trek.
Yeah, I think you read that wrong.
Yeah, you read.
Isn't it the same thing?
Oh my gosh! Oh no!
The same thing.
No. Our show just got canceled.
Wow.
One science fiction, one science fantasy.
Oh
yeah, there you go.
What's the third one? It's Star Trek, Star Wars, and
Firefly.
No.
Babylon 5.
No.
Babylon
Battlestar
5.
Galactica.
No.
Yeah.
Ooh,
What?
Battlestar Galactica.
When I think of it, you guys would be like, "Oh yeah, of course." It's the other Star one.
Stargate.
Stargate.
Oh
Yes.
yeah.
Stargate was awesome
that was
too.
huge. Yeah, I like Stargate.
Jill, the rumor is that you're a huge Trekkie, and that's code for somebody who watches Star Trek, which I now know. We would love to hear. We would love to hear the ranking of the new Star Trek TV series. What's your favorite? What's your least favorite? And then I'll add this on. As a person who has, I've watched the Star Wars movie that came out in 2000, or Star Trek movie that came out in 2009. Absolutely loved it.
Nice.
I watched Discovery. I thought it was okay. I watched Picard. I thought it was fantastic. So I'm interested. I think I have the ability to be a good Star Trek fan. I just don't know where to start. So I'll ask, in addition to ranking them, tell me where I should start as a person who knows nothing about the Star Wars, Star Trek, StarCraft, Star whatever world.
StarCraft.
First of all, here, let's do it twice.
Help me.
There you go. Yeah.
There we go. So first of all, it would be Star Trek Classic. I grew up with it. I started going to conventions because of it, and without it, none of the others would exist. I started watching it in the early 70s, and going to conventions in the mid 70s. So it's without it, there wouldn't have been another generation.
Very true.
And second, of course, is Star Trek: The Next Generation.
The best. I love
yes.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that started when I was a junior high in high school. So it was part of growing up as well. And the third is Enterprise.
Jill is ranking them perfect right now. Perfect.
You agree with this, Ryan?
Yes, absolutely. 100%. She has nailed it.
I mean, it's all right. It's all right.
It's all right.
And,
if Ryan agrees with it and Michael disagrees with it, I know we're in the right.
That's
yes.
that is not how this works.
That's exactly how this works.
And fourth is Deep Space Nine.
That's a good one.
Yep.
Fifth is Voyager. By the way, I do dearly love Voyager as well. We're more dud episodes. So that's why it's in fifth. But I love Captain Janeway. I do love Captain Janeway. And sixth would be Discovery.
I love Discovery.
Yeah. It is growing on me. It is growing on me. So, some of these were hard for me to rank. Like, for instance, where do I put Picard? I still haven't quite figured that one out yet, because to me it's a continuation of the stories from Next Gen.
Yeah.
But it has a different tone.
Yes, definitely.
So yeah, I'm trying to figure that one out. But the animated series to me is a continuation of Trek Classic, because a lot of the stories did continue in the animated.
There's even some people would say that some of the stuff in the animated series is in canon, like you going back to see Spock's like history when he was a kid and how he decided to become part of Starfleet and everything.
Yeah, in fact, some of the original series episodes that didn't get aired were in the animated.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how that show and the movies all still to this day give me that same feeling of, I don't know, just all the great feelings that sci-fi can have of getting involved emotionally. And like I was watching Wrath of Khan yesterday, and it still is just so good. I mean, the lines in there, I actually use some of that stuff in management, believe it or not, in leadership and things like the no-lose situation.
Scenario.
And
awesome,
it's just, it's so good. I don't like to lose.
Right. I think I actually like. I'm a big fan of Star Trek. I mean, everybody. I mean, we all know that like Star Trek is the best series that's ever made. But I actually am not necessarily like, my favorite is Deep Space Nine, and it's because of a different style. It's my style of a Star Trek, and I love the fact that Star Trek has so many different styles of making the different shows. So no matter what, it's still whatever you like is their favorite. It's still like, no matter what, it's a valid choice, because there are so many different variables and styles of making it. So
although Jill's ranking is perfect.
So
I agree with her first choice of having like the classic one being there, because it's campy, but that's what makes it fun, and it also is the origination of the entire franchise. So it's a totally valid thing. I would just put Deep Space Nine up a little bit higher. But
you're wrong, but that's cute. Go on, Noah. What were you going to?
Well, here's my question is: everybody else, literally everybody else I've ever talked to, does not seem to recommend Deep Space Nine. So, Michael, I guess my question to you is this: what in specific about Deep Space Nine is it that you like? I mean, is there a tremendous amount of scenes? Are there ample stools that are available in this?
Wow.
What is it that draws?
Wow. There are a lot of scenes, because that's how TV works. So I get what you were trying to go with the OBS thing, but still, the Deep Space Nine is my favorite because of the depth and the character development, and how like it's most of the shows are like 7 years long. Like Enterprise was the exception, but like most of them, like Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, were all 7 years. But the Deep Space Nine story actually involves the entire 7 years. And I love that as a consumer of media. I love the episodic structure of, so they having this, like, no, not episodic. I'm sure it's what, but the series structure of having like the individual episodes that are watchable on their own, but also having a huge story arc. And that's what Deep Space Nine has.
Yeah, the beautiful story arc. And that's one of my favorite things about DS9. And yeah, for me, it is hard to rank these, because I do love Deep Space Nine as well.
Yeah.
And
I do agree that Enterprise is really underrated, so I like the fact that you put it up so high, because it is quite good. I wish the showrunners weren't so, blind to what they were supposed to be making, but the acting, like even with the bad writing, like, because some of the parts, some of the pieces of the show were so poorly written that you kind of go like, how is this going to work? And then the actors, like they carry it so well. Like even you hear what they're saying is so ridiculous, and like if you just read it off writing, you're like, that's silly. But you watch them doing it, and it's like that. I get why they chose these people, because it was a solid decision for the acting.
I knew I should have put a Star Trek question in here. Michael will never stop.
I won't stop.
I'm learning.
Right, exactly.
You're getting me drawn into. I mean, this is and again, I'm going to make a plug. So, Jill, I've had this plan for 4.5 years. I pitched it to everybody, including Ryan and Michael, but it never goes anywhere.
We've already said yes, but you keep going I need to schedule on my time, so I don't have enough time to do. Yeah, we need to do it. And I think we also should have Jill, participate in that.
Absolutely,
we have to have Jill. It
absolutely,
has to be Jill.
So
we
Jill,
want to do like a mini series on Star Trek, right? A mini podcast.
Right. Awesome.
Yeah. We're gonna get. It's gonna be for people that know that they need. It's their cultural duty, who live in a tech sphere to understand Star Trek, but don't understand Star Trek. Humans. So it's like it's like LPIC. It's like the LPIC series, except for people. It's for Star Trek instead of Linux.
Awesome.
It's certified in Star Trek. In fact, we can even have like a little certification.
Oh yeah, you get a certificate if you once you get through the whole mini podcast.
Right,
like you've graduated. You're now a normal human being.
Oh, well, I do actually also have a bit of Star Trek cred outside of just being a fan.
Oh, really?
I've worked.
This we have to hear.
I've worked for Creation Entertainment, who runs the Star Trek conventions, and I used to do a lot of camera work and audio setup work for the actors on the stage.
That's awesome.
Serious?
Then, yeah, very, very, very involved. In fact, I've got some original. I got one of my tribbles is one of the originals from the set in the 60s, and I have a book that I'm in one of Gene Roddenberry's biographies.
That's awesome. Awesome.
Crazy.
But I wasn't going to.
Okay, so you're hosting the Star Trek podcast, and we will be.
We'll be guests.
Yeah, we'll be guests. Exactly. We were like, we're not going. We just wanted to offer it to you to be a part of it. We're not going to force you. Now we're going to have to force you to.
Now we're going to kidnap you, and it's your job.
Yeah.
But
in fact, we had the very first. I'm sorry, Michael.
No, go ahead for sure.
Interrupt him. It's okay.
Interrupt me as much as you want.
Everybody else does.
We had through Creation Entertainment and with Dr. Ben Rosenthal, who's one of the top 3 at Creation. We had the first ever Star Trek store here in the South Bay in Los Angeles in 1992 through 93 at the heyday of Next Gen. And so we were the first store that only sold Star Trek items. There was only 4 of us employees, but I was what he called his number 1.
Nice.
And he hired me first.
Love it. Love it.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I think we should stay a little bit on. I mean, we're gonna move off the Star Trek, but I want to stay a little bit longer. So, Noah earlier mentioned something that I think we should kind of go back to. So we're all rather disappointed in our friend Noah here because he's never experienced the awesomeness that is being a Trekkie, and he understands that though. So he's decided that he's seen the error of his ways and is willing to change this horrible mistake.
Thank goodness.
And he wants to become a Trekkie and understand what it is about. So for a fellow Trekkie, what do you think that he should use to start his fandom into the Star Trek world?
Definitely Next Gen. And the reason I'm saying that is because of the amazing stories, the great characters, incredible acting, and who could say no to the incredible poetic prose of Patrick Stewart?
Exactly.
That's very true. Yeah.
Nobody's better than Bullethead.
All right, so I know what I'm doing this weekend.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, I love Deep Space Nine, and I would put it as my most favorite. But as far as getting into Star Trek, absolutely has to be Next Gen because it's. I mean, you have Patrick Stewart, and you just have to. But
there is the Riker beard factor in Next Gen, so you have to keep in mind that while we tell you to start with Next Gen, you're going to have to really make it through until you see Riker with a beard, and then it gets insanely good. So it's good, and then Riker gets a beard.
Yes,
it's insanely good.
Yeah. Season 1 is where he doesn't have a beard, but it's still a very good show. Then season 2, all of a sudden he has a beard and becomes a fantastic show. And it's kind of this. What's funny about the way that Star Trek has there's obviously no plan of this, but it kind of seems like it does work like this. Where for some reason the pivot of the shows involve hair for some kind.
Yes.
So like Deep Space Nine, the show is really good, but it gets better when Sisko shaves his head. So it's like, what? And why is this working like that? But it seems
something about hair. Get more confidence,
Yeah, and Noah will learn about the importance of Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra.
Yes.
Is this English?
One day that will make sense.
Not really, but you'll get it later.
Okay.
All right, so bringing it back to Linux. So Jill, you're a part of some fantastic shows. They're so good, in fact, they should be part of Destination Linux. They're on the LGC network, which is amazing. Tell our audience where, because I know they're going to be wanting to hunt you down after this interview, where they can hear more from you.
Okay, so I can be heard on the weekly Linux news show, Linux Weekly Daily Wednesday, or LWW for short.
I love that
play
name.
on words.
It's such a ridiculous name. I love it.
I know. That's why we kept it. And I co-host that show with Ben Stone and Pedro Mateus, of course, at the Linux Gamecast network at linuxgamecast.com. And I do lots of game streams on LGC also, where we test alpha, beta, and new Linux native games on Steam. And we also test Windows games using Proton or Lutris.
Nice.
And I'm actually the Linux Gamecast community organizer, and Ben gave me the name the Morale Czar. That's what he put on the website. I'm the Morale Czar.
That's great.
And I'm also on Big Daddy Linux Live European Edition every month.
Very cool. So those are all the places we can hunt you down on. And
Yes.
Michael, can you please do the Ben Stone impersonation?
Well, that's kind of, I wouldn't call it impersonation. I would call it spot on. But
This is gonna be awesome.
There's one of the things I love about the show is that Vin always has he has this really baritone voice, and it's just fun to listen to. And then every once in a while he just kind of it makes every time I say his name, I can't say it without doing it that way, so it's always like Vin Stone. And
Awesome.
Nailed it.
I don't know. I just like doing it.
The man with the most incredible voice, indeed.
Yeah,
Aw.
it is. It's impressive.
He's amazing. He's an audio engineer, an amazing podcaster. He's done voice acting. He works at radio stations. He's amazing, and he just has an awesome network that I'm so proud to be a part of, and I've learned so much from him.
With the challenging issues that are going on today in the world, it's great to have somebody as excited, passionate, and happy as you are to lift everybody's spirits up. So thank you so much for all of the work that you do and continue to do. We appreciate it in the Linux community, and for coming on the show today. We'll get you back soon.
Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor. I love doing this and love being here with you guys.
We love having you.
So we're going to jump to the news, and Ubuntu 20.04 is now out, and basically everybody knows that. It's been out, we talked about it on Front Page Linux. We put an article out there. Well, I put an article out there. I'm not promoting myself again. That would be ridiculous. But we did cover it. We also covered it on episode 168 of Destination Linux. So if you want to check out the details about all of that stuff, we didn't want to talk about all those details because we already discussed it previously. But we did want to talk about some things that, like some secret bits that Martin Wimpress revealed on Twitter, and also apparently hid in the manual, trying to hide it from Ryan, but Ryan read a manual once, so we did get the information.
No,
So
I read the tweet because I don't touch manuals, but I'm quite certain this is why we didn't know about these secret features, is he hid it in the manual.
Right, that does make sense. But let's take a look at some of these. And Ubuntu now defaults to checking the integrity of the medium in use when booting the live sessions. This is really cool because it enables this. They did it because it shows like if there's a corrupted download of the installation media, or it will tell you that it will install because we won't go through the process of trying to go in the install, and all of a sudden it just kind of stops and doesn't give you a message why. Now it preempts that, so you know if you got your installation media has successfully downloaded or not, which is a really cool idea. Starting with Ubuntu 20.04 LTS, also it's now possible to obtain a certified device experience by installing the general release of Ubuntu. Now, this is really cool because it relates to having like hardware support and hardware certification and stuff like that. And they also mention that they have Dell, HP, and Lenovo as partners that are committed to working with them to have this hardware certified platform that they're going to be doing. And they've already have a list of the different like certified hardware that they've had for a long time, and there's quite a couple hundred or so different devices that are on this list, but it hasn't been updated that frequently. And now this partnership has it to be, they could skyrocket that and accelerate it to, which I'm super excited about that.
I like that they have a lot of the used devices cover, the older devices on there, but this partnership seems like they're going to now start working with these vendors on a lot of the newer stuff as well. And hopefully they add that to the list. It's not the best looking list out there, and I think it could probably be organized better. But I think this is such an important part of what we were talking about earlier. If you want to grow Linux, you got to have those hardware partners in there. They've got 3 amazing partners here, obviously Dell, HP, and Lenovo, that make fantastic laptops. So hopefully some of the newer stuff as well is going to be included in that, and have a place so people can easily go and find out, all right, I'm in the market for a laptop. Which ones are certified, so that I can pick one up with Ubuntu and know I'm going to have support right out of the box.
Right. Awesome. This is really good news because, like, you're right. The list isn't the best looking list. It's not like the destinationlinux.org/picks list, which is fantastic. But this is good that they're doing it, because the certification of the hardware is, like we talked about earlier, and like Jill mentioned, is one of the key factors of getting more people on Linux. So it's fantastic that they're doing it. And also, together with the libfprint project, that is just rolls off the tongue, they've improved the backend and the UI, making it possible for the hardware vendors to support new biometric devices easily, which is very, very interesting. And I assume this is talking about like fingerprint printers and stuff like that.
So this is a common thing in the videos that I do, Michael, with the fingerprint readers. That is one of the parts where I'm like, everything works in Linux on this laptop. Except the fingerprint reader.
Yep.
So I'm very excited that they are finally working on getting this integrated. Now, a lot of people will leave comments, who cares about fingerprint readers? I don't want fingerprint readers and things like that. The fact is, you buy a machine, some people want to utilize that to get into the machine, and it's a feature. Not having it be able to work when you're talking to an audience that may not be in Linux, and you're saying, well, does everything work if I buy this laptop and install Linux in it? Yeah, everything but the fingerprint reader. So I'm glad they're doing work in this area, because it's been a weak spot for a while.
Yeah, that is very cool. And there's also another weak spot that they've actually done a lot of improvements for, and that's the fractional scaling. So like they've had the improvements for the fractional scaling. Like, used to be only could do 100% to 200%, and that was not very helpful in terms of like a high DPI, because depending on your hardware, you could need like 1.75% or whatever like that, rather than doing the full 200%. And now they have a toggle that you can go into the display settings and just turn it on, and it gives you the options to do 100%, 125%, 150%, 175%, and then also 200%, which is a very
As someone with
nice
2K monitors, thank you for that.
Yes, thank goodness.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this: as in response to the including fingerprint reading, I would ask, would any of you actually use a fingerprint scanner to authenticate into your computer, or are we just happy that if somebody wants to do that, they can? Because I've always been a little concerned about the actual security behind those fingerprint scanners.
Well, there's a lot of proprietary hardware and software that goes into a lot of those, which is probably why we haven't seen the Linux support for some of the fingerprints. Some of them work out of the box, but a lot of them don't. And some of them you have to do weird things like install Windows first, enable the fingerprint reader, have it capture all your fingerprint readers. Then you can install Linux and it will work with the fingerprint reader. There's all kinds of weird things out there. Hopefully they will work it out. But personally, will I use it? No. But I think this is more for just other people out there who may not be as concerned about their fingerprint being recorded and sent off to the government.
It's an interesting
and being
question.
Put in jail randomly.
Maybe,
did I go too far? Oh, let me take my aluminum foil hat off.
Yeah. I don't know if it's that big of an issue, but I personally don't do it because I don't think it saves that much time. And I've actually done some testing where it's a long time ago that it took a long time. When I had a laptop that did have a fingerprint reader, it took so long to actually get it to work. I could have typed the password in like 50 times prior. So it's like, is it saving them that much effort? Not really. So I don't see a reason. But I mean, I understand that it's very important for the platform to have it so that people who do want to use it can. And
I think some other cool features here, Michael, are Feral Interactive's game mode performance tool being installed by default. This is really cool.
Yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, I didn't expect them to do that kind of thing, but that is pretty cool to see that by default.
Yeah.
Now, Jill, is this something you use regularly? Do you go and install the Feral Interactive game mode tool on your own?
Yeah. Nice. Because I like that it adjusts the CPU governor to performance when you launch the game, so you don't have to have that setting on by default on your computer. It starts up when you start up game mode with the game.
Very cool.
And that's really beneficial.
Yeah, and I think that it's a really cool idea that they're doing it, and I also think it's something really cool that they're also doing that is it's related to ZFS. But they have this thing called ZSys, which is their own integration tool between ZFS and Ubuntu. So when users can install or update their system, the ZSYS or ZSys will take an automatic snapshot, enabling users to roll back, which is fantastic. Yeah, this is something we've been talking
so much.
When they announced they were going to do support for ZFS, it was like this is the number one thing people were going, I hope this is why they're doing it.
I'm sorry. Huh? This ZSys. So this is based on which file system?
ButterFS.
ButterFS.
Right. Yeah. ButterFS totally has the ability to do.
We're joking, by the way, for anybody listening. Noah's a huge fan of ButterFS. He brings it up constantly. So this is actually ZFS based. But all my friends use VFS. All my friends use ButterFS.
Right,
best of the best
for sure. But seriously though, ZFS is used in this, and this is really cool because these snapshots are available in the grub menu when you boot your system. If there's something that goes wrong, you can just switch back to the previous snapshot, which is fantastic. And it's one of the main things that we were excited about when they did announce ZFS support. And that's one of the things that I think that every distribution should offer. And that's one of the main values that ButterFS offered for OpenSUSE, because it was like the first Linux distribution that had snapshots like that, where you knew that if something went bad, it didn't really matter. Yep. And that's awesome. And also, finally, they gave us the code name for the 2010 release of Ubuntu. And
this made me happy.
It is one of the best. Yeah, it's one of the best that they have ever done. Groovy Gorilla is such a good one.
Imagine the wallpaper, how awesome that wallpaper is going to be for Groovy Gorilla. I mean, there's so much creativity options there for that name. I think it's fantastic. I do want to go back to Fingerprint Reader because one of our patrons, Jacob, mentions, I want a fingerprint as a multi-factor thing requiring fingerprint, TOTP plus a password would be awesome. So there you go. I think there are people out there.
So I can speak to that. So I agree with that to an extent. I agree with it for presence detection. If you want to have a fingerprint reader just to prove that somebody's there, that's fine. I have a problem anytime it tries to distinguish one fingerprint to the other. And the reason I have a problem with that is because it's so easily defeated. So if you want to use it for presence detection, I think that's great. Anything more than that, I think there's probably better tools to get that done.
Like when you come over my house and I get out my special investigative kit and grab the glass that you touched and steal your fingerprint and then go up to your computer and unlock it. Or when I go to self and your computer's unlocked anyway, so I just hack into it.
Or like you just push your fingerprint on the computer like 60 or 70 times and it just unlocks it.
Yeah, I got you. It eventually just gives up and says, okay, cool.
Yeah, eventually just gives up and lets you in. But it's not, I mean, that's exaggerating a little bit, not much.
But but it eventually gives up and just says, yeah, that's groovy.
Groovy Gorilla.
You know what's funny is that I think this is maybe a factor of like, you know, like all the names were good, but they were not fun. Like Disco Dingo was a fun name.
I like Disco Dingo.
But it was like very rare that they did one that was actually fun. And then all of a sudden, and this might be just a conspiracy, but all of a sudden, Martin Wimpress becomes the head of the desktop team. And then now they have really good names. Maybe, just maybe. It's a suggestion.
Wow, that is a conspiracy theory,
right?
For sure.
I was so happy and have noticed while testing Ubuntu 20.04 that it has FFmpeg support for GPU hardware acceleration, pre-compiled with NVIDIA's NVENC and the Video Acceleration API, otherwise known as VAPI, for NVIDIA and AMD GPUs and Intel CPUs. This is really a welcome addition and means you don't have to compile GPU hardware acceleration and FFmpeg for outputting from OBS, video editors, and other applications. And this will help productivity by offloading work from the CPU and creating files that both render faster and are smaller in size.
So, yeah, that's a really good point. VAPI is one of those things where NVENC has always been pretty easy to get working in OBS, but VAPI's kind of been a pain. And I'm so happy that they're kind of including it in there. And I'm hoping it's just basically you go into OBS and choose it now and don't have to go through any, magical incantations of terminal.
Yes.
Yeah, that's really awesome that they have it in there.
If you're a Fedora fan, and I certainly am, then you have something to be excited about with the latest release of Fedora 32. Now, Fedora 32 has some welcome changes like early OOM. It will not be enabled by default, but it creates a stability by allowing the system to recover from out-of-memory situations sooner. It also features GNOME 3.36 with all of its new features, and it adds a Do Not Disturb button for the notifications, improved setup for parental controls and virtualization, along with tweaks to the settings. Now, perhaps my favorite thing that I'm excited about is the relationship between Fedora and Lenovo, making making Fedora-based laptops. You can read more about it in a link we'll have in the show notes from Fedora Magazine. But beginning with the ThinkPad P1 Gen 2, the ThinkPad P53, and the X1 Generation 8 laptops, the laptops will ship with software exclusively from the official Fedora repos. Lots of packaging updates, including Python, Ruby, and more. And if you're wondering how Ubuntu 20.04 and Fedora 32 compare in performance, check out Phoronix, where he's pitted the two against each other with benchmarks. Now, I will tell you, having set up an Ubuntu system on the latest Generation 8 X1 Carbon, that Fedora runs out of the box with no problems. If you're going to use Ubuntu, you have to use 20.04 or later, or the Intel wireless card doesn't have support inside of the kernel. So the kernel ships with 18.04, at least as of about 3.5 weeks ago. The latest kernel that was available on that LTS didn't work out of the box with the latest X1 Carbon. And so again, if you're looking to purchase a new laptop, again, this is probably one of those times when you want to be a little bit further down the road is in terms of rolling releases, and Fedora 32 meets that in spades. Looking at all of the mean all of the numbers, it showed that 2% of performance improvements from Ubuntu over Fedora. This is referencing the Phoronix article. The machine learning and Python categories, Ubuntu had better scores overall. Web browser and GIMP performance also were taken by Ubuntu, but Fedora did a better job in CPU benchmarks and code compilations, as well as GPU rendering and tools like raw therapy benchmarks. Now, I would submit to you that the fact that Red Hat is positioning Fedora to ship by default on a lot of these ThinkPad systems so that you can purchase a system pre-installed with Fedora, and the discontinuation of a couple of their other operating systems that were previously in the Red Hat family, I suspect Red Hat is starting to position Fedora to be more of a enterprise work operating system rather than kind of a beta testing for Red Hat. And I'm excited to see that happen, because I think that probably fits a lot better with what the Fedora community is using. You walk around Red Hat, what you find is a lot of the employees are using Fedora on their laptops as their desktop operating system, day-to-day driver. So I think it fits really well into business, and I think I'm happy to see Red Hat finally kind of restructure themselves, at least the beginning stages, for supporting that in a business environment.
Yeah, I think this is like an about time for me kind of article. I'm so happy to see that they are putting Fedora on, having a partnership with Lenovo and the ThinkPad, which is one of the most popular laptop lines out there, probably one of the most recommended. And having that partnership out there with the official Fedora installation, and they're not putting all of the proprietary crap. When you go get a laptop to repurpose it for Linux, like a new Dell, new Lenovo that has Windows on it, all the bloatware junk that's included on top of it, the antivirus scanner that you want to get rid of immediately because it's probably McAfee or some other, in my opinion, junky virus scanner. But this is just going to come with the open source software. You get Fedora, the open source software, none of the bloat. This is something certainly for a business. You can send it out to the folks on your team, and they can start working near immediately without having to do tons of sysadmin compilations and special setups just for your business. We're removing all that stuff out. It's just amazing all the way around. I was a little surprised with Fedora being it's semi-rolling release, that it didn't do better in some of the categories with its scoring in web browsing, GIMP performance, machine learning areas, especially for enterprise. They did, of course, not surprisingly, do better in some of the CPU benchmarks and things in GPU rendering, and that's likely because later kernels going to have more of the hardware enablement in there later, Mesa. And so obviously I think they need to do some work on performance, and if they want to cater at all to your regular desktop users, which I don't know if that's really in if that's something Fedora is super interested in, or if it's just kind of one of those things that happens as a result of focusing on enterprise. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I like what Fedora's doing, and I do like the fact that they're doing this with Lenovo. It's a really good idea, especially to get like ThinkPads sort of kind of back into the partnership with IBM, because people might not know that IBM sold ThinkPads to Lenovo a long time ago, and now this is a way, since Red Hat is owned by IBM now, they're kind of doing a partnership back together, which I find kind of interesting in general. But also, I think that Fedora has a lot of, it has a lot of potential to be what Noah's saying that he hopes that they're doing or thinks that they're doing. And I think that Red Hat needs to do something like that, because they've basically positioned Fedora for many years, pretty much the entire existence of the platform or the operating system, was to have it as an incubator for Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which kind of made it as a secondary, not really a focus, and just let them do whatever they're doing. And then when they find something that they like, bring it into to RHEL. And while that's fine in general, I think that it's kind of like wasting a lot of potential that they could have in positioning Fedora to be an even bigger player in the space. And especially considering Red Hat is such a huge company in terms of how much money they have, and the fact that they're backed by IBM now, like there's so much potential that Fedora could be, that I think that having it positioned as an incubator is just kind of wasteful. So I hope that Noah's right. That's what they're doing, because that's a ton of potential there.
So let's go back, right? They capture CoreOS, they capture CentOS, they reposition this entire ecosystem, so you have Red Hat on top, the thing that you pay for and works perfectly. You have the free version of Red Hat, which is CentOS, which is still officially supported by Red Hat in terms of community support. It's binarily equivalent to Red Hat. It's just literally the same code recompiled with the branding taken out of it. And now you have the one missing step of the market. All of these people that work at Red Hat and want to use Linux on the desktop, but the operating system that you ship as the standard corporate build is an enterprise software really designed more for containers and servers and those kinds of things, not really meant for day-to-day desktop computing. You have this community project, which is actually a fantastic daily driver for desktop. Right. But the problem with using it, even inside of Red Hat, is the support cycle is only 6 months. And it's a lot of, let's face it, it's a lot of software that doesn't quite work right sometimes. And so to restructure this a little bit and say, okay, now we've partnered with a manufacturer that makes all of the laptops that we're using already, which is the ThinkPad. And instead of having to hack around them, now we can work with the hardware manufacturer to make sure that everything's going to work right out of the box. In fact, we can just order these suckers right from Lenovo, and they'll ship with our operating system running our software in a stable way. And now with the I can't think of the name, but the streams, with the ability to do streams, now we can choose. Do you want to be on the stable stream? Do you want to be on the bleeding edge stream? Where do you want to be? And we have the infrastructure and the ecosystem to be able to let you use a rolling operating system in a stable way. I mean, it's the perfect culmination of a Linux experience, and of course, brought to you all by Red Hat. I have a workstation that sits inside of my bedroom. It's my personal private, I don't use it for any work thing. It's my personal play. It's my personal haven. And that has run Fedora from every version since version Fedora Core 1. And before that, Red Hat 5, 6, and 7. So, and yeah, it's still running Red Hat or Fedora. And yes, I will upgrade to Fedora 32 a couple weeks after it's been out and all the bugs have been worked out. But yeah, I find it to be one of the best.
You end up using Ubuntu for most of your machines.
Yeah, but it's not by choice. It's really more because that's what everybody else is using. And so that's what I need to be able to support. But if I had my choice, if I was just going to go live on an island, I would be using Fedora for sure.
Jill, what are your thoughts on Fedora?
Yeah, so, listening to your really good discussion on it, I think Noah is right that the reason they chose Fedora on the laptop, as opposed, of course, to CentOS or Red Hat, is it has a more forward-facing, interface for the consumer. But at the same time, they are positioning themselves in the AI world. There's the version of Fedora just that runs only containers,
right?
And yeah, so I can see. I do run it on I've ran it, done some rendering on it before.
On one of your 1900 computers?
Yes. And it was always very, very stable. And I can see why Red Hat, why they put Fedora on the Lenovo as opposed to a CentOS. I'm sorry, IBM as opposed to CentOS or Red Hat.
One of the issues I've always had with Fedora, I've always enjoyed running it. There's been several times that I've put it on my machines and had a great experience. I'm not a huge user of GNOME, so I look for the spins. And I feel like Ubuntu flavors have a really well laid out structure in that you're going to get a very similar experience just with a different desktop environment in the different flavors. Whereas the spins on Fedora, I find, tended to have a lot of bugs and issues like your KDE versions and things that made it not that Fedora experience you would be used to on the vanilla Fedora. That was my experience again with my hardware, which is generally more cutting edge. So take that for what it is. But that's been my problem with, really backing and utilizing Fedora full time, was that the quality of the spins just didn't seem to be there. Whereas in Ubuntu, those flavors are usually on point.
Yeah, the spins are not official from Fedora, so they're all separate community things. Whereas with Canonical and Ubuntu, while technically also the same kind of thing, because they're official flavors, they have the infrastructure backing by Canonical. So while Canonical doesn't make the flavors, they do provide a lot of infrastructure for those flavors. Whereas it seems Fedora kind of does more of a hands-off thing, because Red Hat does a hands-off thing with Fedora in general. So I think that the thing I always had a problem with Fedora was that it was always associated to being the Red Hat's big play to desktop, but it really wasn't a big play to desktop. They didn't really seem to care about it for years, and because when you talk about, they actually have a page that explains the relationship between the two, and said it's just an incubator for Rails. So Rails is what they care about, and if Noah is correct about them transitioning to the having a big focus on the desktop, I think that would be fantastic, because that's one of the issues that I have with Red Hat. Like, I'm a big fan of Red Hat overall, but that was always just a little bit of the kink in the armor aspect of it. And if they address that, I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah. Not that I'm a fanboy or anything, but there are no kinks in Red Hat's armor.
Oh, okay, sure. Let's go with that.
So for our software spotlight this week, I picked CMatrix. CMatrix is based on the screensaver from one of my favorite movies, because there was no sequels to it, Matrix. The Matrix, it's basically the scrolling awesome Matrix wallpaper that you can have on there. It shows text flying in and out in a terminal like you've seen in the Matrix movie itself. It can scroll lines all the same rate or asynchronously and at user-defined speeds. It's a pretty cool program. In fact, I think Derek from DistroTube has it in the background constantly, where you see the Matrix theme kind of flying in. So if you've not checked out CMatrix, go install it. Type in CMatrix in your terminal and watch the awesomeness in there. There's also a bunch of tags there as well that you can add to it for doing different settings and operations for the eye candy.
Yeah.
I like TAC R for the rainbow mode with multiple colors, or as Wendy would call it, rainbow vomit.
Nice Hardware Addicts reference. Love it.
That's awesome. I also like the fact that you said it's the one movie. I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
Exactly. We all do. Anybody who's seen the Matrix movie and seen the imposters of the follow-ups would know that everything Ryan said is absolutely correct.
Yep. Exactly.
Hey, you want to learn a random Linux command? It's kind of like those calendars that teach you a new command every day. Well, we have a command string that will show you how to do that. We'll have it linked for you in the show notes, but essentially every time you run that command, it will generate a new Linux command that you can learn. And so you could add that to a script perhaps, and every time your computer starts up, maybe it opens up a little terminal and gives you a suggestion of a command. And then we also suggest taking that over to a production machine and running those commands, just copy and paste and see what they do.
Well, we don't recommend that. No, that's terrible advice. The whole point is to learn the command. So you could use in the man, it will randomly pick a new one each day. You can go and research that command, learn something new every single day. And as I like to say, fill your brains with it, right?
Right. Yep. And just to be clear, the command in the show notes is just the command to give you the random suggestion from the system. It's not like, it doesn't have the calendar thing. That's just an idea you could use with it. That'd be really cool if someone did create a script to do that, or you could just set up to do a cron job to do that if you want to. But this is a really, really cool idea. When I hadn't seen this before, when I ran into my command after I saw in the show notes, I was like, this is awesome, because I was like, okay, what are the odds it's going to show me something that I didn't know the first time?
At 1 o'clock in the morning, I got a message from Michael's brain saying, "This is awesome." What you put in the show notes at 1 a.m.
It was not 1 a.m. I sent, and to be fair, there's a thing that Telegram has where you send it without the sound, so just in case they're asleep. And I did that, but he wasn't. So it wasn't my fault.
Why did you do that at 1 a.m? Couldn't that have waited till the next day?
It wasn't. It was like
during the show note.
If you want me to check to make sure, I will prove.
No,
to
we
you
don't
that
need you to check. It was 1 o'clock in the morning.
We know what time he knows. What time he
I know what time it was.
It was not. It was okay. It was 11:30 for you. That's so ridiculous.
But that's your time zone.
time
And my
difference.
time zone.
No,
is 1
I
a.m.
said for
That's right.
you. It was only 10.
No, totally
He
not.
operates on Central Time
I
Zone.
see.
Yeah.
So in order to do this, you moved for into the Atlantic Ocean.
I was traveling. Yes.
He was traveling. He had a work trip.
Okay, cool.
Awesome.
Glad we
Gonna
settled that.
apologize, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so sorry that I
There
didn't
you
know
go.
that you moved
Now
into
we
the
can move
ocean.
on.
Go sit in your stool for 10 seconds.
All right, cool. I'll put that. I'll put the dunce cap on too.
Okay.
So this is what we're saying is a chef in the head, as it were.
Nice.
Clever.
Nice.
She's hired full time.
Yes, exactly.
Oh my goodness. All right.
The dad joke.
Yeah, that's the best thing about it is the dad joke. I love dad jokes. So, yep. All right. So let's move on to the gaming section.
So this week in gaming, we're going to cover Valve and Proton because it's amazing. And there's some new news that came out that we just couldn't resist. Proton has been an absolute game changer for Linux and continues to be a welcome enhancement to the Linux gaming system overall. For those who may not be aware, Proton is basically a modified version of Wine from Codeweavers with some additional patchwork and libraries that Valve has layered on top. But the headline here is that there are now over 6,500 Windows games on Linux today, thanks to this work and that partnership. Now, I hear a lot of people bragging about their Steam library. In fact, I'm going to ask Jill how many games she has in hers because I'm fascinated with 100 computers. She might be close to this, but I've never met a person that has more than 6,500 games in their Steam library. Jill, how many games do you have in your Steam library?
Now over 3,000.
Oh my gosh, wow.
I do have 3 different Steam accounts.
3,000 games. That's insane. Yeah. Michael, how many do you have? I might have a couple hundred, maybe.
I think I got 190 or something.
I think Noah has 2. But
no, I have all 3 Counter-Strike games, and I have Golf with Friends. Thank you very much.
Oh, 4. My bad. 4.
Yeah. One of my favorite games of all time.
Yes, Golf with Friends is amazing. So they've tested over 12,800 games. So close to half all work on Linux. While gaming is not a hobby everyone is interested in, it is essential, in my opinion, to the growth and adoption of Linux on the desktop. And it couldn't be more exciting for me to be able to look at these numbers, these insanely incredible numbers, and this impressive partnership that Valve and Codeweavers have that has allowed us to play our favorite games and enjoy them in the Linux ecosystem. It's just incredible.
And also the community's involvement with ProtonDB, keeping track of all the different games and testing it and being able to just submit like what your experience was and then having a rating system based on like how many people felt like it was a good experience and that kind of thing. Like the Proton software from Valve and Codeweavers is amazing. And the amount of impact and the involvement that the community was able to, come to collect together and create the ProtonDB thing is just another example of how this whole compatibility layer is just a fantastic piece of the gaming world on Linux, because not only do you get the awesome work by Valve and Codeweavers, but you also get a lot of awesome work from the community itself being able to participate with a database.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And we can't forget about what Lutris has brought to gaming. Commandin is a very close friend of mine. So I've been watching him all these years with the development on the software. And, his software really helped spearhead gaming on Linux long before Valve and Codeweavers were enhancing Wine for Proton. And, Lutris, as I don't know if a lot of you out there know, but Lutris actually uses newer Wine staging builds and enhancements that Valve later uses in Proton. And as a result, many Windows games that don't work with Steam's Proton will work in Lutris. And many games that run on Proton run better and at a higher FPS with Lutris. But all this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Gabe Newell of Valve having this vision and bringing Linux gaming to the world.
Yes.
So well said.
I agree that Lutris is a fantastic tool, and a lot of times I also love the fact that they're so simple to install it, even though you have to do all these specific things. Typically, you had to do these super specific, esoteric things to get games to work with Wine and that kind of thing. And Lutris is like they have like recipe scripts that you just use those.
Yes,
really cool idea, and it's kind of like that if Proton doesn't work, Lutris usually works. Not always, but usually.
That's exactly the experience I had with Warframe. Me and you were playing it for a while.
Yes.
We were having really, really good time. In Warframe, we were playing it out of Proton. Suddenly, it stopped working in regular Steam Proton. Installed it in Lutris, worked perfectly. So I was able to play Warframe again. Lutris is an amazing tool.
Yeah, I love that thing too. Yeah, and also the great point that Jill made was about this. All this is possible thanks to Gabe Newell and Valve. Putting their backing behind the Linux platform, because before Valve did that, we basically had 7 games. So
yeah.
now we have thousands, and it's just fantastic.
A big thank you to each and every one of you for supporting us by watching or listening to Destination Linux. If you want a behind-the-scenes pass into the making of the show, and I'm telling you, especially with this show with Jill, we've had so many amazing conversations off-screen. If you want to be able to see that or chat with us live, consider becoming a patron. Our patrons help keep the show going and get perks like access to the live recordings. Even if you couldn't make it to this amazing live recording here, you get an unedited version of the show where you can watch all the content. The best part is you can join for just a few dollars on Patreon or sponsors.
The Destination Linux Network also has a great way for you to become a part of the community by going to destinationlinux.network and joining our forums. Discuss the show, the network, with all listeners from all around the world, all in one place. If you're looking for more live chat sessions, then join us in our Telegram group, where we have over 1,300 members of the Linux community interacting with one another and sharing their passion for Linux. If you'd like to learn more, we invite you to head over to destinationlinux.network.
And we love hearing from you, so please get back to us, provide some feedback, or ask any burning questions that you have. Send the video links like we had today, or your comments to the email address comments@destinationlinux.org. Please try to keep the comments brief, as we may include them in a future episode of the show. And also don't forget to check out the DLN store, pick up some swag from across the network of podcasts. We have all kinds of awesome designs out there. And we have even a founding members for DLN version of shirts and hoodies out there that are absolutely amazing. And many claim wearing a DLN shirt is a life-changing experience.
Yep, absolutely. I've heard it many, many times.
Yeah.
And if you want more content from us, the fun doesn't stop here. We also have our own channels that you can check out. You could go to youtube.com/DasGeek, where Ryan will fill your brains on hardware, software, and all things Linux. You can check out my content at tuxdigital.com, where I do an in-depth weekly Linux news podcast called This Week in Linux, which just got to 100 episodes, by the way. I already said that, I know that. But anyway, and also other Linux-related content. And you can check out Noah's show, the AskNoahShow.com, where he does a weekly talk radio show on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Central, where you can call in and he'll answer your Linux, tech, and business questions. And also be sure to check out Front Page Linux, where we do a lot of great articles and everything like that. I did those naturally, not self-promotion or anything like that. But speaking of self-promotion, we'd like to offer Jill the opportunity to promote herself. So where can people find you, Jill?
Oh, I can be found at linuxgamecast.com doing the weekly Linux news show podcast, LWDW, and many game streams. And on Twitter at Jill_LinuxGirl, at Mastodon at Jill_LinuxGirl, at mast.linuxgamecast.com. Yeah, that's a mouthful. and via email, Jill@linuxgamecast.com.
Make sure to check out other Destination Linux Network shows like Hardware Addicts, Linux for Everyone, and DLN Extend podcasts.
And our very own Jason Evangelo of Linux for Everyone created a Folding at Home group for the Destination Linux Network. So be sure, if you want to participate in that and help uncover valuable information about COVID-19 and the other issues that the viruses and stuff that happen, you can join that team by joining the 240. That's okay. They don't have a number. They don't have a name team. They have a number team. So it's 240869, and we'll have that in the show notes so that you can reference it rather than having to listen over and over to find out what the number is.
Everyone out there in Linux land, have a great week and stay healthy and safe. And remember that the journey itself is just as important as the destination.
Amazing. Thank you, Jill.
Thank you. Yep. See you next week, everybody.
So happy to have you on, Jill. You're amazing.
Oh, you guys are awesome. It's
family. It's like we've always been doing it.
Yeah,
I know.
right?
That's what it feels like.